Hi everyone, and thanks for downloading my dragon brush set. And when you load it into Procreate, it should be up at the top close to your recent. You'll see dragon set 1, and it comes with these 10 different brushes. And we'll just jump right in. I'm going to do kind of a simple dragon for just sake of demonstration for these brushes here. So I'm starting with that sketcher brush, which acts just like a real pencil. And if you tilt it, you get a larger brush. If you straight up and down, you get a smaller brush. So this is not really going to be a how to draw video. This is just going to be showing you the brushes. I do have a video on how to draw a dragon in my video list, so feel free to check that out. And normally when I draw, I'll do a couple of thumbnails first to kind of see the direction I'm going. For this one, I'm just kind of doing a dragon that's very much like a dinosaur style. And I'm just being really loose with that pencil brush. And the good thing about this brush too is if you hold it down or press down harder, you get darker lines. If you don't press down as hard, you get lighter lines, just like a real pencil. So in this stuff, I'm not adding a lot of detail. I'm just kind of getting an idea of the direction I want the drawing to go. Direction meaning like the overall style of the drawing. And sometimes I'm not happy with it. I'll just go back and erase things. Like that curve of the mouth was a little weird. And again, on the sketch, I won't do a ton of detail. I'll just get my basic shapes in. Sometimes I'll even do a silhouette instead. And then start adding in my details after I find a silhouette that I like. So, but for this one, just sketching in this guy. I'm gonna give him some little small horns. Nothing crazy. And I am going off the canvas a little bit, so I'm gonna take that select tool, move him down a little bit. I tend to always draw too big and draw off the canvas. And now with that basic sketch done, I'm going to make sure my eraser is selected to my outline tool, and then I'm going to go in here and just clean this sketch up. My initial circle shape that I did there for the head. And anywhere that I drew on top of or drew through some of the lines that just kind of got out of hand. And quickly in here, just clean all that up. And then now I'm going to go in and I'm going to switch to my charcoal pencil brush, the next one on the list, and I'm going to go darker on areas of my sketch that need a little more detail. I'm not going to do the whole thing, just areas like the eye and the pupil these little spikes here above the eye. And then like maybe a nostril, because that'll be real dark. And then switch back to my sketcher pencil and then continue to clean this up a little bit. Make sure that everything is readable. Add in cheekbone down here. And pretty much all of my dragons look very friendly, and that is just my style, so feel free to draw a dragon in your own style. Get that other eye in there a little bit. Kind of a 3/4 view going on. I'm not sure if I like that though. I think I'll pull this brow down some. There we go. Clean up these spikes here. And I think I'm gonna change the mouth a little bit. Looking a little too much like he's smiling, a little too friendly. Which isn't always a bad thing with a dragon. But just by changing that one curve, you can see already made him look like he's smiling less. And again, just going around, detailing everything in the sketch, getting rid of some of our super rough lines, darkening things. Hold that down to get a nice line there. Nope, that one didn't want to play as nice. And if you'd like to see more tutorials on how I do my dragons and scales, or just using Procreate in general, just let me know below in the comments. And if you haven't downloaded my brush set yet, go ahead and pause this video, download it from the link below, and then come back. And then you can follow along. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that sketch. We're going to leave it at that. Actually, I say that. I'm going to clean a little bit more of these just stray lines up over here. And then good there. So I'm also going to change my background to anything other than white, because this harsh white is a little much. We're going to go a warm gray there on that background. We're going to add a new layer, and we're going to drag it below our sketch layer. Sketch layer is going to stay on top. I'm going to rename this to sketch. Oh, my keyboard just decided to disappear. Try this again. Call that layer sketch so we know which one. And this is going to be base color. So next we're going to switch to our outline brush, and then we're going to pick a color for the dragon. I've got this red and green palette already loaded, so I'm just going to go with this one, kind of a classic green dragon. And then with that outline brush, we're going to go all the way around. If you get outside the lines, don't worry about it too much. We can go back and clean that up. But we're just going to all the way around everything we want to be green. And for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to do all my colors on one layer. I normally wouldn't do that. I would normally have like all the spikes and the horns would be on their own layer, and the eye would be on its own layer. But because this is demonstrating more of the brushes than it is how to use Procreate, I'm just going to skip that for right now. So once we got the outline done, we're going to color drop that green in, continual fill by pulling our Apple Pencil to the right, so that way we don't have white lines all the way around. I'm going to erase green here where I got a little outside the sketch. And then for the eye color, let's keep going with that classic dragon look. We're going to do a nice red eye. And then for the horns and the spikes, this nice gold color. And I apologize now if you're hearing my cockatoo in the background. She's been quiet all day. And then as soon as I hit record, she starts making weird noises. And I'm doing the horns the same way I did the body. I'm just outlining with that outline brush, the big shapes, where this color is going to go. Again, not worrying too much about going outside the lines. Can always clean that up later. And then I'm going to color drop. Into those spikes. Oop. Didn't want to cooperate there. And I'm going to clean these up a little bit. Clean up around the body. And now we've got our base color. So these are our flat colors or base colors. And I'm going to alpha lock that layer. So you just click the layer, menu to your left, alpha lock. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a few different colors. Because like obviously in nature, nothing's just a solid color. So this guy being all this one color green, we're going to change that. So we're going to pick a lighter green. And we're going to go to our soft shader brush, make it pretty big. And I'm just going to shade very softly some light green onto his nose and chin. And then for the horns, I'm going to go to that yellow color I've got and add this to the tips of the horns, the tips of the spikes. And in this phase too, you can go crazy. You can add a pattern, you can add stripes, kind of just have fun with it and do whatever you would like to do. I think I'm actually going to try maybe some stripes on this guy. And I picked the same red for the eye. And I'm using my shader brush. And I'm just going to pull down some cool stripes on his neck just to give him some interest. You don't have to do this part. Your animal can be something without a pattern. I just wanted to break up that green a little bit. Pull a few of these stripes onto his face. Also, use our charcoal brush, keep its size, and give it a little more definition on some of the stripes so they don't look quite so light. and experiment and have fun. This charcoal brush adds some really nice texture. A few edges of those stripes look a little more defined. And then still with the charcoal brush, I think I'm going to do a lighter color for the belly. So I'm going to pick this paler green, and I'm going to go in here and do this the same way we did all the outline colors, but with the charcoal brush, it's going to make the edges have a nice little texture. And I had to pull that quite a bit to the left, and that was because of that texture with that charcoal brush. But it just makes the edges nice rather than having the super crisp edges. So now we've got our base colors done. And you can go as far with this as if you want. You can add more patterns, you could add more stripes, you could add in different colors. Like, actually I think I'm going to throw in a blue color just to see how that looks. I'm going to go back to my soft shader. I'm going to do light blue on the nose instead of that green. And just do some blue up here on the head. Maybe a little bit on the jaw. And add a little bit of interest. So from here, we're going to add a new color, or a new layer on top. We're going to clipping mask it down, and we're going to change this one to overlay. We're going to pick a really light color, not quite white, but pretty close. And now we're going to start laying in our scale texture. And included in this pack, I've got 4 different scale textures. These are some of my favorites that I've created. This one is one of my favorites I use all the time, and this one took a really long time to create. This was hand-drawn scales that I did, and this one actually follows the cursor, and I really like the way that one looks. So we're going to lay that one down. We're going to erase where we don't want it, like up in the horns and the spikes, but we're going to leave that, the scale pattern, for the back of the neck. And at this point too, you can also add more detail if you want. You can shade some of these scales a little more or leave it as is. I'm going to leave it as is. And then I'm going to go here to scale 1, which is a much smaller scale texture. And then I'm going to lay this one down on the face. And this brush is interesting because if you use light pressure, you get smaller scales. Heavier pressure, you get larger scales. So you can really have fun with this one and mix up the scale shape. Because reptiles in real life, their scales are not all the same size. And like here on the jaw, I want some larger scales. And then going back to small. And then again, I'm going to erase where I don't want those scales. Like on the eye and the horns and the spikes here. And then for the neck, we're going to use this large texture brush. Since the neck, I've kind of done it more like a just skin rather than scales. And we're going to paint in this nice skin texture going with the direction of the neck. And we're going to use that same texture on the horns, just a little smaller, and on the spikes. All right, now that we've got our pattern laid in, we're going to rename this layer to pattern. And we're going to turn it down a little bit so it's not so distracting. It's a little distracting right now, but once we get in some shadows and some highlights, we'll go back and change it. I am also going to add that horn texture to these scales right here above the eye, because even though they're solid scales, they'd still would have some texture to them. Wouldn't be smooth. So now that we've got that, new layer on top, and we're going to clippy mask that. We're going to change this layer mode to multiply. Now we're going to go back to our original main color, and from there we're going to pick a gray that complements it. So a nice kind of cool mid-tone gray. We don't want to go too dark because the multiply layer is going to do that for us. And now we're going to get the soft shader brush, and we're going to block in our main shadows. And I'm going pretty quick here and just filling in big blocks of shading. We'll refine these shadows here in a little bit, and this brush acts just like an airbrush, so if you press down harder, you get more color. If you're lighter, you get less color. So once we get that laid down, I'm going to actually go in here and erase that shadow back off the eye, except for right above. Get that shadow for the eyelid. So we're going to create another layer. We're going to clippy mask it down, and we're also going to turn this one to multiply again. We're not even going to bother changing our color because the multiply layer is going to do it for us. We're going to go to our smaller shader brush, and we're going to go in places that need that darker shadow, like right above the eye, down here in the eye socket, on the bottom of these scales. This little indentation here, we're going the nose and create a shadow. A little shadow back behind the nose. Go in here, the bottom of the mouth and the cheekbone, and just anywhere there needs to be a darker shadow. Right here underneath the jaw, bottom of the jaw. Bigger and get that darker shadow in there. Get that jawbone is casting. Back here behind the horn. This little area in there. Do the bottom of the horns. And then the back of the spikes. And then back over here to the back brow there. It's a little darker in here. Spike will be casting that shadow. These spikes here casting a little shadow on his head. I'm going to blend this out a little bit. Dark on that cheekbone. And if you need to go darker or you feel like your shadows aren't dark enough, feel free to either add another layer of shadows and then you can combine it down when you get done, or go ahead and pick a little bit darker color and go a little bit darker. Just avoid using black for your shadows. Blend that out a little bit there. All right. right, now that we've got our shadows done, and since I've got on 2 layers, I'm actually going to go ahead and combine those layers by pinching them down just to save room so we don't have to worry about it later. And then on top of this, create a new layer. I'm going to clippy mask it down again, and then I'm going to set this one to overlay. And now we're going to do basically the opposite. We're going to get a nice light color, not quite white, but pretty light. And now we're going to start adding in all of our highlights. So again, starting with that soft shader, doing our largest highlights first. And again, depending on pressure, will depend on how much color is laid down. Get that cheekbone and anything that would be catching light. Try not to go too overboard in this step, but if it starts to look too light, you can start blending some things down, or you can actually turn the opacity of the layer down, and that helps if everything ends up being a little too bright. But I'm going just pretty lightly with that soft airbrush. So just like the shadow layer, we're going to create another highlight layer on top. Same thing, clippy mask, overlay, and then again switch to the smaller shader brush, and we're going to go in here anywhere that needs a nicer bright highlight, like top of these little spikes here. We'll be catching light, the bottom of the eye to make it look more round. We're going to go a pretty small brush there, tear duct there, and then we're going to pull these eyelids up by making them lighter. These wrinkles in here make it a little lighter, catch a nice little light. This little kind of bony ridge here, top of the nostril, top of the lip, this area of the jawbone. And in this step too, feel free if you want to detail a few of the scales out. I do that in some of my paintings. In fact, if you go watch my video on the peridot dragon, I actually detailed every single one of the scales on that one. I actually laid the scales down the same way I did with this one, and then I went back and blended every single one. It took a long time, but it gave it a really neat look. And sometimes if you're going for a more realistic style, that is an idea that you can do. So now that we've hit those a little bit brighter highlights, add some shine to the horn and these spikes here. I'm going to do one more light layer, so I'm going to do a new layer on top, clippy mask it down, but this one we're going to set to color dodge. We're going to stick with that same color we have, but this one we're going to do some rim lighting. So we're going to go all the way around the outside of the dragon for the most part, areas that would be catching light. Some rim light and reflective light. You can also do some cool things here if you would like to. You can not clip this layer down and then do a little bit of Gaussian blur and give it a nice like glowing effect. I do that again for quite a few of my paintings. But this one, for the sake of the brush demo, I'm going pretty quickly because I know people probably want to start using the brushes. They don't want to watch an hour-long video about the brushes. Adding a little extra light there to the bottom of the jaw, some like reflective lighting. And then some reflective lighting on the back of the horns, the back of the spikes, and then in here where some lighting might just get picked up. just like bounce lighting. And I said this was our last light layer. I actually lied. There's going to be one more on top of this. And again, I'm just going anywhere I think. Just a little more light. So one more light layer. So we're going to go on top again, clipping mask, and we'll just leave this as normal because this is going to be our brightest highlights. Now going back to this charcoal pencil, we're going to go in here and add the highlights for the eye. And do a little highlight down here, the tear line, and a tear duct. And any area that, if you want to give it sort of like a wet look, a nice shine, we can add that. So I'm just going to kind of go in here. I'm going to hit a few scales that I feel like might be shiny. Just doing a highlight on one side. And again, play around with it. You can set the color modes to something different if you want. You can detail as many or as few scales as you like. You can do a lot of fun things with all these brushes. And again, I'm just kind of adding little spots that I think, might have like a little bit of shine to them. And then from here, we can just add a simple little background. So I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to drag it below the base colors. I'm just going to grab this large texture brush. I'm going to switch to that red that we did the stripes out of. Make this brush nice and big. And just throw some interesting little bit of background there. And there you go. Very simple, quick little dragon. Done with my 10 brush dragon pack. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Be sure to check out my other videos on different ways of drawing dragons and different tutorials and different techniques that I use in Procreate. And yeah, there you go. Enjoy.